Hey, welcome to That One Time, the place for unforgettable moments and stories worth sharing. Funny, touching, surprising, just like life itself. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Stepping out of the building entrance, Alex shivered from the biting cold. November had enveloped the world in pitch-black gloom, though the clock showed only 8 in the evening. Icy gusts of wind howled through the bare tree branches, and cold autumn rain poured mercilessly from the sky. Faster, faster across this damp, cold yard. There, by the 12th entrance, waited his faithful Swallow, an old but reliable Daewoo Nexia, their family breadwinner. How uncomfortable it was around in such weather. They say for a reason that on such an evening, not even a caring owner would kick a dog outside. Well, for Alex, this was even a plus. More chances for fares, and thus for good earnings today. By day, he worked as an economist at a bank. The salary was quite decent by their city's standards. And yet, almost every evening, Alex had to go out for a second shift, driving a taxi. Money was desperately short. Funds were needed not for a new car, a spacious apartment, or holidays at exotic resorts, although that wouldn't have been bad either. The main expense was Arthur's treatment and rehabilitation. Arthur, their elder son, was for Alex both a source of immense joy and a constant nagging pain. How they and Sarah rejoiced when their firstborn came into the world. Alex still clearly remembered his wife's shining eyes by the maternity ward's discharge room. With what pride she handed him, flustered, that weighty bundle of swaddling clothes and wraps. Alex carefully lifted a corner of the blanket and saw his son's face for the first time. The baby was sleeping, his eyes tightly shut and his little brows furrowed angrily. Alex felt as if a warm wave had washed over him. He couldn't believe his happiness. Could this tiny human being really be his child? At first, Arthur grew into a perfectly normal, healthy boy. He developed exactly according to the books. He started fixing his gaze on objects, rolling over, and sitting up on time. And he even walked earlier than expected. He wasn't even a year old yet. Alex and Sarah proudly watched the progress of their bright little one. Alex was a very involved father. Returning from work, he immediately hurried to his son, played with him, bathed him, fed him dinner, giving his wife a break. He did this not out of a sense of duty, but because he genuinely enjoyed spending time with Artie. Moreover, the little one was simply a model child. He grasped everything quickly, didn't throw baseless tantrums. Even though he was still so tiny, much could be explained to him with words, almost like an adult. Of course, Sarah and Alex often dreamed about their son's future. "He's so smart," the happy mother smiled, watching the little one build a tall tower out of building blocks. This toy is meant for children age 3 and up, and Artie is just over a year old, and he's already figured it out. He'll probably grow up to be a talented engineer or architect. Alex agreed. It seemed to him too that Arthur was developed beyond his years. In this, he saw Sarah's merit, who wasn't lazy, playing developmental games with her son all day, reading fairy tales, introducing him to the world. "I wish he'd go to school soon," Sarah dreamed. "They'll probably praise me at parent-teacher meetings." "And me," Alex smiled. "I'll go too, taking turns. It's not fair otherwise, all the glory to you alone." When Arthur turned 1, the couple learned about a new pregnancy. This came as a complete surprise. They hadn't planned to give Arthur a brother or sister so soon. He was still a very young child, requiring a lot of attention. And then, another baby on the way. At first, they were a little scared, but then they calmed down and were even happy. "It's for the best," Sarah assured. "The age gap isn't big. They'll have common interests. They'll have fun together." "Yes, that's a plus, of course," Alex agreed. "But how will you manage? I'm at work until late evening. There's no one to help. Alone with 2 such tiny ones?" "I'm not the first. I won't be the last," Sarah bravely said, stroking her still barely visible belly. "Others manage, so we will too." The pregnancy went well, except for terrible morning sickness in the first weeks, which hadn't happened with Arthur. "Probably a girl," pale Sarah smiled. "That would be great, a complete set. Although a boy is good too, It's more interesting for boys to grow up together. Alex didn't care who was born, a boy or a girl. Something else worried him: his wife's and the baby's health. Sarah was very tired. Arthur had grown and turned into an incredibly active child, needing constant supervision. At the routine ultrasound, it turned out that Sarah was expecting a girl, and not just one. The ultrasound technician confidently announced that the couple should prepare for twins. It was a shock. Alex almost grabbed his head, but held back for Sarah's sake. She lay on the couch, beaming with happiness, watching the monitor where the doctor was showing their daughters actively kicking their arms and legs. "Remember how we dreamed of a big family?" Sarah asked on the way home. Of course, Alex remembered. He met his future wife at the university, at a festive concert followed by a disco. It was there that Alex first noticed the pretty, slightly shy Sarah. Her friends were dancing enthusiastically, while she stood by a pillar, watching with a smile. At first, Alex simply admired her from afar. Something about this gentle, modest girl captivated him. Perhaps her naturalness, meekness, calmness, and also, she had an amazingly kind, warm smile. When Alex first saw how it lit up the stranger's sweet face, he immediately knew he was in love. At first sight. Of course, he approached her, learned her name, and started a conversation. Now Alex no longer remembered exactly what they talked about. Probably banal questions. Where do you study? What do you do? And then fate itself gave him a chance. A slow melody began to play. Alex invited Sarah to dance. On completely legitimate grounds, he could put his arm around her waist, feel her closeness. It seemed that at that very moment, he realized he would never ever let go of this charming creature. He wanted to protect Sarah, make her happy, make her laugh, to see her gratitude and that smile. So beautiful, gentle, kind. They started dating. With each passing day, Alex became more convinced that Sarah was his soulmate. They understood each other with half a word, saw many things the same way, even chose the same films. It was no surprise that a few years later, right after graduating from university, Alex and Sarah got married. Both came from ordinary families, not rich, but not struggling either. They didn't inherit an apartment, but the couple, who had already started their first jobs, were able to get a mortgage. Their family nest became a small 2-room apartment in a residential area. Alex thought at the time that this was just the beginning. He planned to climb the career ladder, maybe even become a department head. And why not? He was a responsible worker, not afraid of difficulties. And then they could move to a more spacious apartment. But now this 2-room apartment was perfectly adequate. Sarah acted as the interior designer. With what inspiration she chose wallpaper, tiles, lamps, curtains. Of course, the budget was quite limited, but Sarah managed. After the renovation, the apartment was transformed, looking like a stylish home from a glossy magazine. "How did you manage that?" Alex was amazed, not expecting such a result. "Natural talent," Sarah chuckled. It was true. Then Arthur arrived, and now the news about the twins. Alex seriously considered for the first time. He wasn't coping. Their family was about to become large, and he still wasn't a department head. The salary, of course, had grown, and the position was more solid than at the start, but dreaming of a new apartment or car was out of the question. Alex then seriously began weighing options for starting his own business. He didn't yet imagine that they would soon truly need money, a lot of money, and not at all for improving their living conditions. Much more pressing needs would arise. When Sarah was in her last months, Arthur suddenly fell ill. High fever, severe cough. This happened for the first time in his 1.5 years of life. Before that, he hadn't even had a runny nose. Of course, the young parents were very worried. Alex took sick leave to be with his wife and son. Sarah's belly had grown to incredible size, making it difficult for her to move. And Arthur, he so wanted to be held. He felt very sick. Alex rocked him in his strong arms for days on end. Then the illness receded, the fever dropped, the cough disappeared. Sarah and Alex breathed a sigh of relief, but Arthur changed greatly. He became completely different. His parents didn't recognize him. The formerly cheerful, curious little one turned into an apathetic, indifferent child. If before he would curiously climb everywhere, causing trouble, now he just sat in a corner and methodically arranged everything within reach in a line: toys, dishes, shoes, books. Silently, intently, staring somewhere into the void. It seemed Arthur had stopped understanding speech directed at him. The little one hadn't spoken before his illness, only babbled in his own language. But he understood everything. He brought toys when asked, chose food, participated in games. Now, their son seemed to have shut himself off from the world with a wall, and when the bewildered parents tried to engage him, Arthur threw tantrums with screaming, tears, and rolling on the floor. He was impossible to stop. The nightmare ended only when the little one was exhausted. He would fall asleep right on the floor or lie silently, staring into nothingness. It was terrifying. The unknown was frightening. Of course, the worried parents took the child to doctors. They just shrugged, advised waiting, prescribed vitamins, explained the condition as consequences of the illness, assured that the body would recover. Alex and Sarah hoped, they wanted to believe the prognoses, but both already suspected they were facing a serious problem. They tried not to voice their fears aloud. And then the girls were born, Annie and Lara. As often happens with twins, they arrived a little early. They were very small and weak. They spent the first month in the hospital in special incubators, fed with special formulas. Alex saw his daughters there. Annie and Lara lay, tangled in tubes, so tiny, so thin. They were very different from their older brother, who had always been large, rosy-cheeked, bursting with health. Alex's heart ached at the sight of the girls. Weak, almost transparent, so touching. Would they make it? They made it. Annie and Lara were discharged from the hospital with good weight and excellent prognoses. Life with newborn twins and a 1.5-year-old son with unexplained problems. It was something else. Sarah and Alex temporarily forgot about sleep, sleeping in snatches, taking turns on duty. Alex still didn't understand how they endured it then. The girls grew, developed on schedule, delighted with their intelligence, gave smiles, joyful emotions. But Arthur? He withdrew further into his own world. He barely reacted to what was happening around him. Despite being busy, the parents managed to take Arthur to doctors. They initially saw no deviations. Well, what do you expect? The pediatrician shrugged. First a serious illness, then immediately 2 younger sisters for the little one. Of course the boy is in shock. Give him time, he'll recover, everything will be fine. Only time passed and things got worse. Baseless tantrums, restless sleep, monotonous, repetitive actions. But most frightening was Artie's detachment. He no longer smiled at his parents, didn't seek their attention. He paid no attention to his little sisters at all, as if they didn't exist. Arthur's peers were already starting to talk, trying to play with each other in the yard. Sometimes they argued, but they communicated, gravitated towards each other. Arthur, however, sat somewhere in the corner of the sandbox and methodically poured sand from one bucket to another, for hours. Sarah and Alex would have preferred, like other parents, to run around the yard with their son, making sure he didn't fall. But that wasn't happening. Arthur didn't go to kindergarten at the proper time. Sarah didn't send him. He's not ready, she shook her head. Maybe on the contrary, kindergarten would do him good. Alex doubted. He'll start interacting with children, learn something. Sarah only shook her head mournfully. She knew her son best of all. Her eyes. There was such sadness in them. Alex was ready to do anything, just not to see that bitterness, that fear in his beloved's eyes. The worried father secured an appointment with a professor, an experienced specialist who was difficult to get in to see. It was he who delivered the terrible diagnosis that shattered all hopes and dreams associated with Arthur. Autism, and of a severe degree. Yes, at first such children develop normally, and then there's a regression. Always. Sometimes a vaccination serves as a trigger. Sometimes, like with Arthur, an illness. Sometimes it happens without apparent reasons. You will have to accept this fact. The professor looked at the frightened parents sternly, speaking sharply. Life isn't over, it will just be different. The boy requires treatment, rehabilitation. The result? Difficult to say. Some compensate, others, but anything can happen. In any case, your son now needs lifelong treatment and your support. For the young couple, their whole world collapsed. They remembered their plans, their dreams for Arthur, and couldn't hold back tears. Even Alex cried, secretly from Sarah though. In front of her, he held it together, trying to appear composed. The diagnosis wasn't easy to accept, but at least it became clear where to go. Endless trips to hospitals, developmental centers, rehabilitation clinics began. Arthur was accepted into a special needs kindergarten where specialists worked with him. True, they had to drive to the other side of the city every day, but they seemed to notice a result. By the age of 5, Arthur finally started talking. It wasn't conscious dialogue, but repeatedly uttered phrases from cartoons and commercials. But the parents were happy even with this. Annie and Lara also grew. They were wonderful girls, not geniuses, but ordinary happy children, cheerful, artistic, loving their parents. They were friends with the neighborhood kids, adored animals, played with dolls. It was important to them how they looked. The girls often hugged mom and dad, gave smiles, were happy about walks, and these ordinary things Alex and Sarah perceived as the greatest happiness. Of course, Sarah didn't return to work after maternity leave. Arthur needed a lot of time. She worked with him at home and constantly took him to clinics. And the girls needed attention too. Work for Sarah was out of the question for now. Alex became the sole breadwinner. The bank paid well, but a lot of money was needed for treatment and rehabilitation. A lot. Sometimes relatives and foundations Sarah contacted helped, but most of the expenses fell on their shoulders. Alex did everything he could, helped with repairs, drove a taxi in the evenings. Alex finally reached his car and slid into the warm interior. Fatigue. Now he felt only heavy weariness and despair. He knew that even if he drove a taxi all night, he wouldn't collect the necessary sum. Sarah had learned about a new method at a local private center. An enthusiastic doctor was organizing a course for such children, promising impressive results. But it was expensive. There was little time left to raise the money. Lately, Sarah often hinted that Alex wasn't coping, couldn't provide for the family. She didn't accuse directly, no, but she sighed, voiced the needed sums, looked with silent reproach. It was unbearable. In such moments, Alex felt like a nobody. Yes, he couldn't provide for his wife and 3 children. They had lived in the same 2-room apartment for almost 10 years. Had never flown to the sea, drove an old Nexia inherited from his father. It was already starting to rust. But the main thing was that Alex couldn't pay for the treatment his son so desperately needed. Arthur's return to a normal life cost a lot of money, and Alex didn't know how to earn that kind of money. It was a fact. It was hard to constantly feel guilty for the child's condition. It was impossible to get used to this feeling. And on top of that, he couldn't give enough attention to his daughters. He was always disappearing at work and doing side jobs. Annie and Lara adored him, clung to his neck as soon as he crossed the threshold. It was so touching, so sweet, that Alex's heart ached with tenderness. It was a pity they didn't spend time together often. Sarah was very tired. Over the years of Arthur's illness, she had turned into a thin, bitter woman with a harsh gaze. She nagged her husband about every little thing, poured out her fear and irritation on him, demanded, swore, sometimes insulted him. Alex understood her and didn't condemn her. On the contrary, he felt very sorry for Sarah. He remembered her as she was before, the meek, gentle girl from the assembly hall. Sometimes that old Sarah peeked through, and Alex felt almost happy. But lately, it happened less and less often. Alex sighed, started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness of the yard. He pressed the gas pedal to the floor and set off to look for passengers. On such a foul evening, there should be many. Who wanted to get soaked in the rain waiting for a bus? Alex even somewhat enjoyed driving a taxi. Sometimes he got interesting clients. Many confided their deepest secrets to the driver. Over the years, he had listened to many incredible stories. Perhaps someday, when he had time, he would even write a book. The evening went on as usual. Alex drove several people who had stayed late at work, delivered a package, took an upset man to the train station. Hours flew by unnoticed. Night fell, black, uncomfortable, hopeless. As luck would have it, there were no fares. Alex didn't like forced downtime. He lost time and didn't earn money. It was frustrating. He decided to drive around the city himself, just in case he got lucky. It happened sometimes, but the streets were empty. A bad shift was shaping up, and this was when money for urgent rehabilitation was so needed. Sarah would sigh heavily over the earnings again. And even worse if she cried. Alex couldn't stand his wife's tears. It made him scared, truly scared. Alex drove out of the city onto the bypass road. It was faster to the center that way. He needed to look there. Surely someone needed a taxi. The center was the busiest place. There were few cars. The rain was pouring down. Alex had to turn the wipers up to maximum. He glanced at his phone, almost 2 in the morning. A little more, and it would be time to go back. He had to get up at 7, get at least a little sleep. Otherwise he'd mix up the numbers in the report again and lose his bonus. He couldn't let that happen. Suddenly, his headlights picked out a human figure hurrying along the roadside. Alex slowed down, looked closer. Strange. Who would think of walking along the highway in such weather, and at night no less? An inner voice, wise and practical, advised him to drive past. It was clear the situation was murky, and Alex had enough problems of his own. He needed to earn money, look for fares, not get involved in dubious adventures. Home, Sarah. She was waiting for money. Alex had many obligations. What could be simpler than driving past and forgetting about the person on the slippery, dirty roadside? But Alex realized he had stopped. This person clearly needed help. There were almost no cars. Maybe he was the stranger's last chance. Alex sighed and made the only right decision. Pulling up alongside the figure, he braked. Alex was very surprised to see that it was a girl standing on the roadside. Very young, almost a child. Probably not even 20. She was wearing a wide raincoat, clearly from someone else's, a man's shoulders. She was soaked to the bone and shivering. But what was this? The coat was stretched tightly over a protruding belly. She was clearly pregnant, and judging by appearances, quite far along. The scene became stranger and stranger. The stranger looked at Alex with eyes full of hope and despair. Her whole face was wet, either from the rain or from tears, probably from both. The man silently opened the passenger door. The girl slid into the cabin, and a dirty puddle immediately formed on the floor. "Please, let's go," the passenger pleaded. "Quickly, or he'll catch me." Who? Alex? Flashed through Alex's mind. Was this unfortunate girl being pursued by someone too? Perhaps he was putting himself in danger, getting involved in someone else's problems. But what choice did he have? Kick her out? Leave her on the highway in the downpour? No, he couldn't do that. So, if she said they needed to go faster, he had to go faster. Alex pressed the gas pedal to the floor, and the car shot forward. He didn't think about where to go, just sped along the empty highway. The girl kept looking back. Finding herself in warmth and relative safety, she relaxed a little, let her feelings show. Large tears streamed down her cheeks, sobs tore from her chest, but she held back with all her might, not letting hysteria overwhelm her. Alex looked at her with pity. So young, pregnant. What had happened to her? How could he help? "Where should I take you?" Alex finally asked. 10 minutes had passed. They had covered a decent distance. To the police? No. The girl shook her head fiercely. Not there. Alex's doubts grew stronger. Why was she afraid of the police? Had she done something wrong? Was she being chased? Suspicious. What had he gotten himself into? As if he didn't have enough problems of his own. The girl seemed to read his thoughts. "Don't think that. I'm not a criminal. Nothing like that. It's just that he has connections there. You understand? And when I ran away, he must have reported me. Said I stole something or did something else. Anyway, if you take me to the police, they'll either detain me or, even worse, hand me over to him. Do you understand?" "I don't understand anything," Alex sighed. "Of course you don't," the girl nodded. "You don't know anything. I know that people shouldn't be on the highway in this weather. Cold and rain, especially young girls in your condition." The strange passenger, as if remembering her pregnancy, gently stroked her belly. "I ran away because of him, you see. Or rather, because of her. I'm having a girl, when I think that she too could have fallen into his hands, into the hands of that terrible man." "What terrible man are you talking about?" Alex decided to find out the truth. He needed to decide where to take her, and it was time to go home. "It's my husband." "Well, almost. We weren't married, just about to be. Now I'm very glad we didn't get married." "And why is he chasing you? Why did you run away? What happened?" At that moment, the girl turned around, noticed the headlights of a car catching up, and completely tensed up, shrinking back. Then she slid down so she couldn't be seen. The car sped past. The girl exhaled and returned to her seat. Amazing agility for a heavily pregnant woman. "Not him," the girl smiled. "Lucky." "So where should I take you?" Alex asked the main question. "I need to think," the girl said, and then unexpectedly introduced herself. "By the way, my name is Vicky." "Alex," he replied automatically. "Very nice to meet you," Vicky smiled. Alex chuckled. In such strange circumstances, the conversation suddenly took on the tone of a polite chat. "I'll tell you what happened to me, but please don't stop. Just keep driving around the city. I'll pay for the gas and the time. Or rather, my father will pay." "Believe me." Alex shrugged. If she wanted him to drive, he'd drive. It wasn't difficult for him. "It's just that I'm afraid he might have tracked us down after all. If you stop, then you never know." "All right," Alex nodded. "I'm listening carefully. Tell me everything, just be honest. And then perhaps we'll figure out how to help." "Okay." Vicky took a deep breath and began her long story. Vicky was born in Zelenogorsk, a regional center. Her father was a successful businessman, her mother didn't work. Vicky lived in a large house with a pool and garden. From a young age she lacked nothing. The only child of wealthy parents. Expensive toys, trips to the best resorts, lessons with the best coaches, designer clothes, an elite private school. Vicky always had the best of everything. Her father simply adored his daughter. She was the only grandchild for 2 pairs of grandparents. From birth, she was bathed in love and attention. Until she was 10-12, Vicky thought everyone lived like that. Then she looked around and realized there was another life running parallel. More difficult, more dangerous, but perhaps more interesting. In her last year at the elite school, she became bored. It seemed all the interesting things were passing her by. She wasn't even allowed anywhere alone. After school, a bodyguard picked her up, drove her to classes and clubs, and accompanied her to the mall. It wasn't that she was in danger. Her father conducted business honestly, had no enemies. The bodyguard was more like a nanny, to make sure no one bothered her on the street, that she wasn't hit by a car. Her parents felt more at ease when a specially trained person was nearby. Most of Vicky's classmates were in the same situation. Graduates were still accompanied by bodyguards and nannies. Her classmates seemed boring to Vicky. The same hothouse plants, grown under a bell jar. The boys and girls never gathered alone, without adults, to do anything wild. Her father, meeting with friends, sometimes reminisced about his childhood. Vicky listened, not missing a word. That was life, freedom, adventures, dangers. And her? Vicky knew that after school she would go to study in Moscow. A place at Moscow State University in the prestigious Faculty of Finance and Economics was ready. Dad had taken care of it in advance. She wouldn't have to live in a dormitory. They rented a large, stylish apartment near the campus buildings. And of course, a housekeeper and a bodyguard would always be with the Golden Girl. Everything as always. A fun student life was not in the cards for Vicky. Her father didn't intend to loosen control, even from a distance. True, as she got older, Vicky gained more rights, but it still wasn't enough. Her parents continued to consider their almost adult daughter small, naive, surrounded by dangers everywhere. Vicky tried to talk, to explain that she needed freedom, but she met with complete incomprehension. "But you are free," her mother shrugged. "You choose what you want to do. You dropped math, chose the racetrack, no one said a word. You want to go to Italy? You go? You want to go to Thailand? You fly. What other freedom are you talking about? What you're asking for isn't freedom, her father echoed. It's neglect. Do you know how many such unwanted children I saw in my childhood? I was one of them myself. I was lucky. I made it. But many didn't. How many ruined lives passed before my eyes? You have a happy life. Don't invent nonsense. Vicky realized she wouldn't get through to them. She tried to protest, but only managed to get herself taken to an expensive psychologist. The sessions were unpleasant because they spoke to her in an overly gentle manner, as if she were mentally ill. Vicky finished school. It was her last summer before Moscow. The capital awaited. Something new. She hoped to gain more freedom, even with her father's watchdogs. He not only hired a housekeeper, almost a nanny, and a bodyguard driver, but also alerted all their relatives and friends in the capital. They were supposed to keep an eye on her too. It was a sunny June day. Vicky wandered through the mall in a gloomy mood. She needed to buy a swimsuit for a trip to a resort. She had many. She just needed an excuse to leave the house. The boredom had become unbearable. Her classmates had left. There was no one to invite. Vicky invented ways to entertain herself. A gray, dreary life, well-fed, but boring. She lacked adventures, bright emotions. At least the bodyguard stayed in the parking lot. Vicky had begged him. He called his boss and only then nodded, letting her go. Well, at least that. Vicky went to the food court. She was hungry. She craved junk food. At home, the cook only prepared healthy meals. Vicky ordered hamburgers and soda. Making her way to a table, she stumbled. Later she realized, over a forgotten toy car. Fate, probably. Vicky lost her balance. Falling, she dropped the tray. As if in slow motion, she saw the brown liquid splash out of the glass and fly straight at her. A second later, the pain of hitting the floor and the cold from the soda. For a moment, she sat on the floor, assessing the disaster. Soaked through, her light sundress hopelessly ruined, hamburgers scattered, sauce smeared on the hem. How could she go to the parking lot looking like this? Everyone would stare. Tears welled up, anger and frustration. And then, strong, reliable hands caught her from behind. Someone helped her up. Vicky turned around and met the eyes of her rescuer. A young guy. A real looker. Not like her scrawny classmates. Tall, strong, masculine. Muscles under a tight t-shirt. An athlete. An open, simple face. Regular features, a toothy smile. Hair the color of ripe wheat. And his eyes. Incredible, piercing blue eyes on a tanned face. "Are you hurt?" the guy asked, looking Vicky over. She was flustered, something that hadn't happened in a long time. "No, just—" Vicky spread her hands in confusion, showing her sundress. The wet clothes clung to her figure, which the guy eyed with interest. Admiration was visible in his eyes. Vicky had never felt this before. A chill in her stomach, goosebumps, slight dizziness. "Yeah, the dress will clearly have to be thrown away. It's a pity. It really suits you." "I don't care about it," Vicky smiled. "But how do I get to the car looking like this?" "Very simple." The guy smiled, took off his t-shirt, and offered it to her. "Here, put this on. Nothing will be noticeable." And you?" Vicky asked in surprise, admiring his tanned torso. How perfect he was. "What about me?" he chuckled. "Let them look. I have no hang-ups." "Thanks." The girl smiled and put on the t-shirt. It smelled of men's cologne. Through it, his scent. It caused a slight dizziness. She wanted to wear that t-shirt forever. "Shall I walk you out?" the guy asked. "Of course," Vicky quickly agreed. How good that he offered himself. They walked through the mall. The stranger introduced himself as Mark. Vicky also gave her name. They walked and chatted about the weather, cars, easily and casually, as if they had known each other for years. Vicky saw how he looked at her. She had caught his eye. Mark didn't hide it. "I really like you," the guy said at the exit. "Stunningly beautiful and smart. Will you leave your number? I'll call. Maybe we can meet." Of course, Vicky was thrilled. The handsome guy was going to ask her out. An adventure. Mark was so real she wouldn't be bored with him. She'd have to be cunning to meet him without the bodyguard. Well, it was all right. They'd figure something out. Vicky dictated her number, and he immediately called it. Wow, what a phone you have! Mark was surprised when he saw her phone. Vicky was embarrassed. She understood that Mark wasn't rich. She didn't want that to matter. I'll wait for your call, she stammered. Mark stepped towards her. After a moment's thought, he carefully put his arm around her waist and kissed her. Right there in the mall, in the middle of the crowd. For Vicky, it was her first real kiss. Before this, she had kissed a classmate to try it out. It was wet and unpleasant. But now, in this magical moment, she was happy. It felt like they had become one. He held her tightly. She felt his strength. Her legs felt weak. Her head was spinning. Butterflies fluttered in her stomach. Sorry, I couldn't help myself, Mark smiled. It's just, you're so beautiful. I liked it, Vicky confessed honestly. Mark beamed. That day, Vicky couldn't fall asleep. Mark sent messages, called her an unreal beauty. In the evening, he called to say goodnight. Vicky replied to his messages. She wanted to call, hear his voice, assure herself of his interest, but was afraid of being pushy. They started meeting secretly. Vicky had to sign up for yoga. The bodyguard drove her to the fitness center, but Vicky didn't go into the gym. Instead, she ran around the building to the back entrance. She would slip out and into Mark's warm embrace. How good it was for them. He made her happy just by being there. She couldn't stop looking into his blue eyes. And his smile, toothpaste white with dimples on his cheeks. They walked around the city, sat in the park, talked. They went to the movies. When it got colder, Mark started coming in his old car. It would occasionally break down in the middle of the road. Mark would curse the rusty tin can, get out, open the hood, fix something, rolling up his sleeves. His strong, capable hands knew what they were doing. The engine always started. Nothing was impossible for Mark, which earned him even more respect. Soon they knew everything about each other. Vicky told him about her well-fed but boring life. Mark shook his head, listening about her travels, her home. Yes, you really are a princess, he remarked, learning about her family. I probably won't be able to provide you with such… Don't be silly, Vicky interrupted him. The last thing she wanted was for him to feel awkward. You're the best person I've ever known. Surely the guys around you come from families like yours. They're spoiled, boring, I can't stand them, Vicky said heatedly and kissed Mark. You're incredible, he breathed, gently lifting her face by the chin. Mark told her about himself. He lived in a small regional town and happened to be in Zelenogorsk by chance, on business, sorting out documents for his business. He and a friend were opening a car repair shop, trying to earn money because there was no normal work. He had to travel a long way to meet Vicky. The more she cherished their time together. Unlike Vicky, the guy was born into a very poor single-parent family. He didn't know his father. His mother raised her son and daughter alone, working 2 shifts. The children grew up like weeds. Mark's childhood resembled Vicky's father's childhood, hanging out on the streets with the neighborhood boys, having adventures, fun and dangerous. Vicky listened, holding her breath. She regretted that a normal childhood had passed her by. I finished 9th grade and ran away from school. Not for me, Mark recounted. I went to an automotive college. Cars always attracted me, I understood them. We were always hanging around neighbors' garages, helping with repairs. That's how we learned. And then the army. In the army, he signed a contract. He needed money. His mother earned pennies, his sister had a child by someone unknown, and became a burden. Mark understood that his family needed help, and as a man, he made the decision. True, the money came with great difficulty and at risk to his life. Several years in a hot spot. He didn't give details, but Vicky understood. Her beloved had encountered something terrible there, something he wanted to forget. His eyes, when that period was mentioned, became frozen, cold, alien. He immediately grew up and distanced himself. Something very bad had happened there. Vicky hugged him, stroked him comfortingly. He quickly recovered, a smile again lighting up his familiar face. As soon as the contract ended, I quit. I realized a military career wasn't for me. The money I earned was enough for a small apartment on the outskirts. There was even some left for starting a business. I had to take out a loan, but it's fine. The workshop is already making a profit. Small for now. Vicky understood that Max, Mark's partner and friend, worked in the police. They had served together, survived together. This turned out to be useful. In a small town, beginner businessmen have many competitors. Having their own people in the police was a salvation. Mark's life was full of dangers, struggle, adventures. It was vibrant, and Vicky's existence resembled a stagnant pond. True now, with Mark, life had become more interesting. Secret meetings, like in the movies. Only she wanted to be with Mark always. He wanted it too, saying so almost every time they met. At night, Vicky imagined their life together. Wonderful scenes. But summer would end soon. She would be sent to Moscow. Then, the end of their relationship? No, she couldn't let that happen. The thought of no more dates made her feel sick. Gray, boring life again. After she had learned what it felt like to be happy. With Mark, she felt like she was behind a stone wall. He always knew where to go, what to say, what to do. He made decisions easily. People often called him for advice, and he never refused anyone. In his firm manner, he would suggest a solution or promise to think about it. Vicky liked how sought after he was. That's what he was like. Everyone needed him. What a wonderful person. He knew everything, could do everything. Confident, decisive, strong, experienced. So much behind him. He endured, didn't break, was hardened. With someone like that, nothing was scary. Mark often suggested meeting her parents. Why are we sneaking around like children? I want everything to be proper. And I even like it, Vicky smiled, lying out of happiness. Of course, it was great to meet openly, but secret dates were an adventure. And besides, she understood her parents wouldn't approve. They would lock her up at home or make the bodyguard escort her to the yoga studio, and then there would be no meetings. I want to take you to my town, to fall asleep and wake up next to you. I dream about it, Mark said, squeezing her hands. I don't have enough of you, you understand? These sincere words made Vicky's head spin. She had never felt so desired, so beautiful. These feelings filled her with warmth, made her happier. Mark had imperceptibly become the most important person. For the sake of being with him, Vicky was ready for anything. So she came up with an excursion for her former class, a 2-day trip to Petersburg. Her father approved, gave her money, told her what to see. The bodyguard drove her to the station, put her on the train. Vicky bought a ticket so as not to arouse suspicion. But in the carriage, she ran to another door and got off on the opposite side. She jumped right into the arms of Mark, who was waiting for her. It was the first time Vicky had been in his town. Small, dusty, cramped, uncomfortable. But what did it matter? The main thing was he was there, and they had 3 days together. A wonderful period. No rush, plenty of time. Mark's apartment turned out just as Vicky had imagined. Small but new, with good renovations. There was clearly a lack of furniture, which added a certain charm. It turned out Mark was a wonderful cook. Vicky felt awkward. She hadn't even made sandwiches at home herself. They had a cook. Mark quickly taught her how to make simple dishes. Vicky asked him to. It turned out it wasn't that difficult and was even pleasant, especially when cooking for the one you loved. You're a talented student, Mark praised, chewing her slightly overcooked cutlets. Very tasty. Mark introduced Vicky to Max, his friend and business partner. She learned they had served together. Max had gone through the same hell. He wasn't eager to remember that period. The friends had plenty to talk about. They discussed the workshop, made plans, argued. Vicky realized they were passionate about it, and it also turned out they didn't have enough money for development. She offered to help herself. I overheard what you were talking about. You need money. I have it. My father transfers money to my card every week. I don't spend that much. A decent amount has accumulated. I can give it to you. Don't be silly, Mark protested. How would that look? How would I feel? What's wrong with that? Vicky didn't understand. You're my beloved. You do so much for me. I want to help too. In the end, Vicky persuaded him. Mark, embarrassed, accepted the help. The 3 days flew by quickly. It was time to return. Vicky cried, hugging Mark before getting out of the car. The train from Petersburg was arriving. She saw the bodyguard. He had come to meet her. And at home, waiting for meetings again, calling secretly. How hard it was after the weekend. Then, everything changed. Mark started calling less often, replied to messages with single words. There were no compliments, no admiration. Vicky became worried. Had she disappointed him? She went over the recent days in her memory, found nothing. Mark had seemed loving. What was wrong? Not wanting to be tormented, Vicky asked directly. He replied that he had temporary problems, lots of things to do. He assured her that he loved her, that she was the dearest. It was just a difficult period. Maybe you need help? If it's about money? No. Mark cut her off and seemed offended. But then he admitted that some support wouldn't hurt. Vicky gladly transferred the sum, even more than he asked. He assured her he would return it. It didn't matter to Vicky. She wanted everything to be as it was before. Meetings dwindled. He didn't have time to travel. Business took up his time. Vicky understood that she needed to wait it out, but she desperately missed him. A month flew by unnoticed. It was time for Moscow. Vicky knew it would come, but she felt as if fate had punched her in the gut. The day before, Mark arrived. Unexpectedly, without warning, he found her at the university. You're here! Vicky joyfully hung on his neck. Yes, Mark nodded. Where else would I be? He declared it was time to talk to her parents. He insisted that she call her father and tell him everything while he was there. They needed to legalize their relationship, so many changes. Vicky didn't want to, but Mark was firm. She told him. Her father listened without interrupting, then announced that he would come to get her immediately. You don't understand. I don't want to go home. We're going to live with Mark. We're a family. Her father didn't want to listen. It turned out he knew about the meetings, hadn't interfered, knowing Vicky's stubbornness, but had made inquiries. He's a bad man, her father shouted into the phone. He's very dangerous. Don't stay with him. I knew you were sneaking off to see him, but forbidding it was useless. You were being watched to make sure nothing terrible happened. I hoped a new life in Moscow would sweep you away and you'd forget him. You knew? Yes, I knew, and I know more. Are you aware that he was involved in… Mark snatched the phone and hung up. Fury blazed in his eyes. Vicky had never seen him like that, but it was understandable. He had heard every word her father said. Well then, it's time to make a choice, Mark said sternly. Your parents won't accept me. That's obvious. No, Vicky objected. They don't know what you're like, and when they do… That's how it is, Mark countered. The choice, either them or me and our child. Vicky thought. She remembered her father, mother, the luxurious house, a golden cage. It was hard without parental support, but she was an adult. She had the right to make decisions. And they still considered her a child. It was unbearable. Of course you! Vicky walked over and hugged him. He softened a little, smiled. That's great. We're leaving for my place today. What about university? What university? Mark hugged her. You're expecting a baby? You shouldn't be stressed or tired. Vicky almost cried. He was so touchingly caring. That same day, she withdrew her documents from the dean's office. That was it. She was free now. Vicky moved in with Mark. While collecting her things, she faced pressure from her parents. She was prepared. Her mother cried, her father pleaded, scared her, threatened her. Vicky didn't give in. Mark had warned her that her parents would try to talk her out of it. Wealthy people like your parents consider guys like me paupers, gigolos. How right he was. That's exactly what her father called him. It was unpleasant for Vicky to hear these insults. She felt disgusted with her parents. How could they? Trying to speak calmly, she argued that she was an adult, 18 years old, of legal age. Go, her exhausted father declared. But know this, when you realize what kind of person your Marky is, come back anytime, in any condition. We will always take you in. Vicky nodded and quickly left the house, full of confidence that she was leaving for a happy life with her beloved and soon with their child. Her parents would eventually realize they were wrong. Mark was waiting at the gate in his old car. Seeing her, he jumped out to meet her, hugged her, and took her bag. "Hey you!" her father shouted from the balcony. "If you hurt her, there will be big problems." Vicky noticed Mark's eyes flash with fury, but he controlled himself, silently put her in the car, got in himself, and started the engine. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. So did she. Their life together began. They didn't get married, though. At first, Mark wanted to save up for a wedding, then Vicky's belly became noticeable, and he decided to postpone it until after the birth. At first, Vicky enjoyed the closeness. She liked falling asleep and waking up next to him, making breakfast, waiting for him. He was caring, bought fruit, asked about her well-being, accompanied her to the doctor. Vicky felt happy and loved. Mark was by her side, their daughter would be here soon. How touching he was at the ultrasound. He almost cried when they said it would be a daughter and showed her on the screen. But as time went on, Mark's behavior began to change. At first subtly, then more noticeably. Fault-finding. It started with that. First jokingly, then seriously and irritably, he accused her of being a bad housekeeper. Where and when could she have learned to run a household when there had always been helpers at home? Vicky knew how to cook. Mark had taught her. She dusted, she did laundry. Mark demanded more. He was unhappy with dirty floors, scattered things, a smeared refrigerator. He called her messy, incompetent, a slob, sighed, and started cleaning everything himself. Vicky felt sorry for him and felt ashamed. Burning shame. He knew how to instill guilt. He was a virtuoso at it. Later, it turned out Mark abused alcohol. He might drink at home or come home already tipsy, explaining it was a friend's birthday. Sometimes, friends gathered at their place. Max almost always came. Vicky didn't like him. He was somehow fake, selfish, unpleasant, and he looked at her suggestively, allowed himself crude jokes. Mark didn't react. It was hurtful. Mark looked up to his friend like an idol. Apparently, when they served together, Max had almost saved his life, which was why they had such a relationship. Mark went to work every day at different times, sometimes in the morning, sometimes towards noon. He worked at a factory and was developing his business. Money was desperately short. Thankfully, Vicky had brought valuable things from home: jewelry, designer clothes. All of this was gradually being sold off because Mark needed money for his business, and there simply wasn't enough for food. The workshop wasn't bringing in money. Mark explained it was the initial stage, said it was always like that. But one day, Vicky suspected that the workshop didn't exist. Her suspicions were confirmed by Max, who laughed when Vicky mentioned that her husband was a businessman. True, he quickly composed himself. Vicky understood everything. At the time, she still thought Mark was lying to seem more respectable. She pushed away the memories of the money she had given for the business, which apparently didn't exist. Vicky didn't communicate with her parents. Mark didn't explicitly forbid it, but she understood that it would be unpleasant for him, and she didn't want to anger him. Yes, she still loved him then. Despite the insults, Vicky somehow considered them deserved. One day, Vicky clearly realized that she felt bad being around Mark. He had become distant, a stranger. Now he only found fault and demanded obedience, domestic feats. At the same time, they were desperately short of money, not just for baby clothes, but even for groceries. Mark earned almost nothing. They lived on the money from selling Vicky's things. Their funds were running out. In her jewelry box, there were a couple of rings, a chain, a brooch. The rest was at the pawn shop. Vicky realized she had made a mistake. But how could she go back to her parents after that conversation? She would have to admit they were right, make herself look foolish. She was ashamed. So she stayed with Mark, hoping for the best, trying to conform. And then, Mark raised his hand to her for the first time. It happened when she didn't have enough money for expensive pills prescribed by the doctor. "Where am I supposed to find that kind of money for you? I'm not a millionaire. Ask your daddy. After all, this child is his granddaughter." "To daddy?" Vicky repeated. "Then maybe I should just go live with daddy? What do I need a husband like you for?" Before finishing, Vicky realized she shouldn't have said that. Mark's face flushed, his eyes widened, his gaze became furious, terrifying. "So that's what you think of me?" he shouted, sweeping plates off the table. "You're no better than your parents. You consider poor people second class." Then came undeserved insults, swearing, words Vicky had never heard. She stood, stunned by the rage, not recognizing him. Had she really loved this man? He hit her in the face, so hard that she fell. Luckily, there was a sofa nearby. She slid onto it. Her cheek was burning, tears gushed out. Mark froze, not expecting it himself. He cursed and went into another room, slamming the door. A few minutes later, he stormed out of the house without saying a word. He came back before dawn, drunk, not aggressive. This was repeated. Physical abuse became commonplace. It seemed, having allowed himself once, he couldn't stop. Vicky regularly received slaps for unwashed dishes, a burnt pie, unnecessary questions. One day she threatened to report him to the police. The guy laughed unpleasantly. "Go ahead and complain," he sneered. "Did you forget where my friend Max works? He's risen through the ranks, has people everywhere. What do you think will happen to your report?" Mark was not easily scared. Of course, Vicky's patience snapped, and she decided to leave. But Mark wouldn't let her. Seeing her bags, he took the key, stood in front of the door. He begged, apologized, promised to be a loving husband, called himself names, assured her everything would be fine. And Vicky wavered, threw herself into his arms. She was sure the worst was over. But nothing changed in Mark's behavior. Reproaches, fault-finding, physical abuse, drinking, it continued. Vicky packed her things again. This time, Mark didn't apologize. He roughly pushed her away from the door, took her phone and the key. Vicky sobbed, begged him to let her go. "Why do you need me if you don't love me? Let me go." "You're carrying my child now," Mark explained. "You'll give birth, leave my daughter with me, and you can go wherever you please. I can't let my daughter grow up without a father. I grew up without a father. It's hard." That's when Vicky first thought Mark wasn't entirely mentally stable. A little later, she was convinced. She tried to run away at night while he was asleep. It was impossible during the day when he was out. He locked her in, took the key. Not through the window, it was the 5th floor. Vicky crept into the hallway, quietly turned the key. He woke up. He burst out of the bedroom, pushed her away from the door. She fell, hitting her shoulder painfully. Mark lost control. He screamed, threw things, then handcuffed Vicky to the radiator. She didn't know where the handcuffs came from. Most likely Max gave them to him. He was a policeman after all. From then on, Vicky's life turned into hell. For days she sat chained to the radiator in the corner of the living room, away from the window. In the evening, Mark would come, feed her, but wouldn't answer questions, wouldn't pay attention to her pleas, her requests for forgiveness. He ignored her, punished her with silence, indifference, as if she were nothing. Sometimes she thought, what if he doesn't come one day? She would starve to death. Fear washed over her in waves. Mark was not normal. Her father had been right, although perhaps even he didn't understand how sick Mark was. Otherwise, he would have kept his daughter at any cost. He was a terrible, dangerous man, not accountable for his actions. And she had become his victim. The apartment where she had once been happy had become a prison. One day, not particularly hoping, Vicky dared to ask, "What happens next? I'm due soon. Will I give birth in handcuffs too?" "Yes," he simply replied. "What's wrong with that?" "I've watched a lot of videos. It's a disgusting process, of course, but nothing difficult. Nature will take care of it." "I'll give birth here?" Vicky was horrified. "Yes," Mark nodded. "Afterwards, I'll take the baby and you'll be free. Just bear with it, it's not long now." Vicky turned cold. Mark wasn't joking. He really intended to do that. This man was not normal. How had she not noticed before? Vicky understood that home birth without doctors could end badly for her and the baby. Most likely, for both. She had to act urgently. She couldn't just sit there. One day, a convenient opportunity presented itself. Mark's friends came over. Max, unpleasant and dangerous, possibly just as abnormal, and another older man. They settled in the kitchen, talking, drinking, smoking. They were having a good time. The unfamiliar guest asked why Mark kept his wife chained up. He lied about her diagnosis, saying that during pregnancy, a condition flared up that made Vicky dangerous. He had to take measures. Mark spoke convincingly, and Max corroborated. The guests even expressed sympathy. The evening went on. Vicky waited for her moment. Fate took pity on her. The unfamiliar guest approached Vicky, squatted down with a pitying face. Ah, so young and such trouble. Imagine. Mark and Max got drunk. The stranger was barely holding himself up. Please, give me the key. It's in Mark's jacket pocket, Vicky asked. What for? The man grew wary. Blinking his cloudy eyes. I need to go to the toilet. It's fine, Mark always lets me. Yeah, the man tried to think. Why don't you ask him? He gets very upset when I ask. It's an unnecessary reminder of my condition. I don't want to spoil his mood. Vicky said the first thing that came to mind. She didn't particularly expect it to work, but it did. The guest went into the hallway, found the key, and unlocked the handcuffs. Vicky! Where did she get the strength? She rushed into the hallway, grabbed the first coat she could find from the hanger, Max's raincoat, and slipped out through the unlocked door. Vicky knew she had to hurry. The man had probably already told Mark. He would be furious. It was terrifying to imagine what he would do if he found her. She flew out into the black November night. It was late, but buses were still running. She ran without looking where she was going. In the coat pocket, some change. Very useful because the icy wind and rain made themselves felt. She was chilled to the bone. She jumped onto the first bus. Inside, it was warm and cozy. She settled on the back seat, thinking, what should she do? No money, no phone. She couldn't go to the police. Mark had said Max had everything covered. The old bus wound through the night streets. There were few cars. So, Vicky noticed it right away. Mark's familiar car. It was driving slowly in the right lane. So they were already looking. Was Mark driving? He could barely stand. Vicky sank lower in her seat, almost lying down, causing the conductor to look at her in confusion. Do you need help? The woman in the orange vest asked. Should she tell her? No, she couldn't. She'd think she was crazy, call the police. And at the police station, she couldn't go to the police. It's all right, Vicky shook her head. She got off at the last stop because the bus went no further. Finding herself at a deserted stop on the outskirts, she shivered. What now? She couldn't go back to the city. They were looking for her. She had to go somewhere, maybe towards her hometown, or hitchhike on the highway. Someone would give her a ride. The route to Zelenogorsk was busy. A dangerous decision, Vicky understood, but there was no other way out. They would find her quickly in the city. And I just walked forward, Vicky said bitterly. Sometimes it seemed like they were coming. I hid behind bushes, but each time it was someone else. I asked for help, everyone drove past, and then you picked me up. That's it. Alex sat, stunned by the story. Was it really true? Or maybe she was crazy, dangerous. Although she didn't seem like it, her speech was clear, her gaze was clear. A decision formed instantly. He couldn't do otherwise. We're going to Zelenogorsk, he said, to your parents. Really? You'll take me? Of course. What else can I do? A girl in your condition, pregnant, without money, without support. Some people are looking for you. Leave you on the highway? Leave you to fate? Alex couldn't. Of course, he would lose fares, spend money on gas, time. He wouldn't get enough sleep again, would be late for work, get reprimanded. But that was nothing compared to this girl's problems. On the way to Zelenogorsk, Vicky relaxed a little. She leaned back in the seat and dozed off. Alex looked at her with a smile. Good, she needed to sleep. She had been through a lot. Closer to the town, recognizing the familiar landscapes, Vicky perked up, became livelier, and started asking Alex about his life. He answered honestly. She was distressed, felt sorry for Arthur and his parents. It was clear she genuinely cared. It was early morning when Alex, pulling up to a large house behind a high fence, turned off the engine. Did I really make it? Tears welled up in Vicky's eyes. Shall I see you in? Alex asked. Thank you. You've done so much. I'll go myself. And you. Wait. My father will surely want to talk. Vicky slipped out of the car, pressed the doorbell. The gates opened, and she disappeared behind the fence. What was happening in there, he wondered. Her parents probably couldn't believe their luck. Their daughter had returned. Alex sincerely hoped that Mark and Max would be dealt with. If Vicky was to be believed, her father was an influential man. He wouldn't let this go. Alex's eyes were heavy. He was nodding off. He wouldn't get any sleep today. Coffee all day, then straight to bed after work. Taxing tomorrow was out of the question. At that moment, his phone rang. Alex glanced at it. His wife. Strange at this hour. Something must have happened. Where are you? Sarah's anxious voice came through. Come home quickly. Arthur is ill. We're leaving by ambulance. The girls are home alone. What's wrong with him? As always, a tantrum. I couldn't stop him. Come home quickly. Alex started the engine. Even at high speed, it would take at least an hour to get there. Vicky's story vanished from his mind. He didn't even remember that she had asked him to wait. He had more pressing things to worry about. When Alex pulled up to the house, it was already getting light. Annie and Lara were sitting huddled together on the sofa in the living room, scared, anxious, sweet, touching in their pink pajamas. Alex picked up his daughters, carried them to the bedroom, tucked them in, and sat beside them until they fell asleep. Arthur, another setback. Money for rehabilitation was urgently needed. Otherwise, what? It was hard to guess, but certainly nothing good. Sarah returned an hour or an hour and a half later. She found her husband asleep on the floor, next to the girl's bed. She sighed, didn't wake him, and covered him with a blanket. Arthur was kept in the hospital for a week. They warned that without treatment, serious deterioration was expected. Life went on as usual. Arthur was in the hospital. Alex worked day and night trying to raise the sum. Sarah knocked on the doors of foundations, but there was little chance. Funds were primarily raised for surgeries. Children like Arthur were not a priority. Alex barely remembered the story that had happened a few days ago. He had too much on his mind, too many worries. One morning, his boss called Alex into his office. Alex went with gloomy premonitions. He would be reprimanded for being late again. He often arrived later, unable to get enough sleep. But Alex realized he was mistaken as soon as he saw Vicky in the office. She looked different from that foul night. Rested, refreshed, stylishly dressed, a beauty. A man sat beside her, sturdy, tall, with an attentive, sharp gaze. It was immediately clear. Father and daughter, they resembled each other greatly. Well, you talk here, I have things to do. The boss smiled and left. The man stood up, walked over to Alex, and shook his hand firmly. Thank you. You saved my daughter. Sincere gratitude was visible in his eyes. A daughter is the most precious thing. But I just gave her a ride, Alex replied. Your daughter is brave. She saved herself. She wouldn't have saved herself if it weren't for you, Vicky interjected. She walked over to Alex and hugged him. I was stopping cars on the highway then. They saw me, but drove past. No one wants problems. But you saved me. You yourself needed saving. My daughter told me about your situation. And what happened next? Alex asked. With Mark? Did you find him? Of course. Vicky's father nodded. Immediately, that same night, or rather in the morning. That scoundrel will get what he deserves. A cruel man, and his friend Max's position won't help him. Mark had a difficult childhood, an abusive stepfather, no one to protect him. Then the hot spot, he saw all sorts of things there. That's how he went off the rails. At first, he planned to be with Vicky for the money, to bleed me dry through her. But you see how it turned out? My daughter broke ties with us. The plan failed, and Mark decided to act differently, demand a ransom. At least that's what he explained to the police. He terrorized Vicky, treated her terribly. A terrifying man with a broken psyche, and that's the kind of monster Vicky fell in with. Vicky listened to her father sadly, eyes downcast. It was clear she hadn't recovered yet. And would she ever? We want to help your son, Vicky suddenly addressed Alex. Arthur. Yes. Her father perked up. We learned about his diagnosis. I contacted doctors in Petersburg. They are waiting for the child at a rehabilitation center, along with the family. Your hotel is paid for. Arthur will be treated, and you can explore Petersburg. There's a lot of interesting things for the girls, and the doctors at this center are the best. They help children with much worse conditions. I need to talk to my wife. Alex couldn't believe it. Was the problem really solved? She knows everything. Vicky's father smiled. We talked. She's packing the suitcases. Your wife was happy, not just about Arthur's treatment, Vicky interjected again. Sarah smiled and said that her husband is the kindest, most noble man in the world. She is happy because of that. Alex felt his heart warm. The world around him became brighter, lighter.